In the spring of 1865, as Union troops swept through eastern Georgia, they found something they were never meant to see. Inside the collapsed remains of Waverly Hall Plantation near Burke County, soldiers from the 55th Massachusetts uncovered a series of stone-walled chambers beneath the main house. Inside were 19 children, thin, pale, and terrified, each one bearing the same uncanny features: light copper hair, pale green eyes, and a narrow, angular face. The officer in charge, Captain Elijah Dorsey, wrote in his report that the children appeared to share a single lineage, their resemblance too precise to be coincidence. None of them could name a father. When asked who their mother was, the oldest, a boy of perhaps 12, said softly, "We all belong to the Mistress. She says we are her blood." That line, "we are her blood," haunted the men who heard it. Dorsey's letter to his commanding general was sealed and marked confidential. Local histories would later claim Waverly Hall was destroyed in a fire, its ruins swallowed by the forest, but fragments of the story survived in court ledgers, church registers, and private correspondence. Piecing them together reveals one of the most disturbing sagas in Georgia's plantation history: the tale of Evelyn Marston, a woman whose cold ambition and warped logic led her to create what she called the perfect generation. Evelyn Danforth Marston was born in 1818, the daughter of a wealthy cotton broker in Savannah. She married at 21, not for love, but for land. Her husband, Nathaniel Marston, was a planter from Burke County who owned nearly 1,500 acres of cotton and tobacco fields, known as Waverly Hall. Nathaniel was a large, convivial man, fond of horses, cards, and whiskey. He was also deeply in debt. When a sudden fever took him in the winter of 1849, he left behind a widow of 31, a half-finished mansion, and creditors who were already circling. The Marston plantation was in poor shape even before his death. Cotton yields had been falling for years. The red clay soil was exhausted. More than a dozen enslaved workers had been sold to pay gambling debts, and the remaining 30 or so were malnourished and fearful. Evelyn inherited not only her husband's land, but his losses, mortgages totaling nearly $10,000, an immense sum for the time. For most widows in her position, the options were few. She could sell the estate and return to her father's home in Savannah, or remarry and let another man manage the property. Evelyn chose neither. She was proud, fiercely intelligent, and obsessed with control. She saw in Waverly Hall not a ruin, but a blank slate. If she could not buy prosperity, she would breed it. That phrase appeared in her personal journals, discovered years later by a lawyer's descendant. If the land is tired, we must replenish it. If the people are few, we must breed them anew. The plan she conceived was chilling in its simplicity. Evelyn believed she could create a self-sustaining labor force through what she called selective cultivation, an organized, methodical breeding of human beings for endurance, obedience, and loyalty. She began her experiment within weeks of Nathaniel's death. The first entry in her coded ledger, written in an agricultural cipher, read simply, "Rootstock 1 selected, night mild, first planting begun." The rootstock was an enslaved man named Samuel, 27 years old, known for his size and steady temper. Evelyn summoned him to her private chamber under pretense of household instruction. What occurred there was recorded in her cipher as initial cultivation successful. Within a month, she was pregnant. Evelyn told her neighbors the child was Nathaniel's posthumous heir, conceived shortly before his death. Few questioned it. Propriety demanded silence. In December 1849, she gave birth to a son named James Nathaniel, who, according to the birth ledger, arrived early but strong. That same winter, she dismissed the overseer, citing mismanagement, and began running the estate herself. The following spring, she ordered the construction of new quarters behind the old smokehouse windowless rooms of brick and timber sunk partly into the earth. To outsiders, she claimed they were storage cellars for tobacco and grain. In truth, they became the breeding chambers where Evelyn's cultivations were carried out. Over the next decade, Evelyn gave birth 5 more times, 3 boys and 2 girls. The fathers were all enslaved men from the plantation. each chosen for height, strength, or healthy complexion. After each child was weaned, the father disappeared, sold quietly to distant plantations, often under the guise of settling debts. Evelyn recorded their sale prices in her ledger, alongside notes about their traits passed on successfully. Her children grew up in a strange twilight world. Legally, they were enslaved. Evelyn registered them as the offspring of enslaved women who died in childbirth. But within the walls of the manor, they were treated as something more tutored privately. Dressed neatly, fed well. Evelyn referred to them as the lineage. She told them they were special, born of good stock, meant to serve the land as the land serves God. They were forbidden to speak to the other enslaved children and confined mostly indoors. By 1854, Waverly Hall had become eerily productive again. Cotton yields rose, the debts began to shrink, and neighbors spoke admiringly of the widow Marston's remarkable efficiency. No one knew that her prosperity was built on a monstrous science. But someone did begin to suspect. Thomas Marston, Nathaniel's nephew, returned from Atlanta in 1855 to settle family accounts. He was 20 years old, idealistic, and fond of his aunt, despite her cold manner. He noticed peculiar things, the way certain enslaved boys resembled Evelyn around the eyes, the whispered fear in the quarters, the constant deliveries of herbs and tonics from a local midwife named Ada Bellamy. When Thomas questioned the midwife, she refused to answer. Days later, he searched Evelyn's study and found her cipher journal. The symbols made little sense until he realized they corresponded to agricultural terms. Seedlings meant children, harvest meant birth, rootstock meant men. What he read horrified him. Line after line of breeding calculations, projected births, and even notes on desired pairings among first-generation stock projected completion by 1870. He confronted Evelyn that night, trembling with fury. She listened in silence, then smiled faintly. "You think this is evil, Thomas? It is nature. The strong propagate, the weak die. Do you imagine your uncle's wealth was built on anything nobler?" Thomas threatened to expose her. Evelyn's reply was chillingly calm. "You are family. I would hate to see you ruin yourself with wild accusations. People might think grief has unhinged you." Within a month, Thomas fell ill. The doctor called it typhoid. He died in agony 2 weeks later. No inquiry was made. Evelyn attended the funeral dressed in perfect mourning black. From 1856 to 1860, Evelyn's program expanded. The first generation of her children, James, Margaret, and William, were entering adolescence. Evelyn began pairing them with selected partners from the enslaved quarters. Some resisted, others obeyed from fear. Those who defied her were sold or vanished into the woods, never seen again. Ada Bellamy, the midwife, became complicit. She was given a small cottage and generous payments to manage the plantings. It was she who administered the herbal abortifacients when pregnancies occurred outside Evelyn's control. In one surviving letter, Bellamy wrote cryptically to a friend, "I am paid well, but I think I work for the devil herself." By 1861, Waverly Hall was a fortress of secrecy. The main house's windows were shuttered even in daylight. The overseer was dismissed. Evelyn's children were kept indoors almost entirely. Their pale skin, untouched by Sunday visitors, were rare, and those who came left uneasy, whispering that the widow Marston had gone mad from grief. When the Civil War began, Evelyn claimed neutrality. She supplied the Confederate Army with cotton and cloth, quietly ensuring her protection. But in late 1864, as Sherman's forces approached Burke County, she ordered the estate's tunnels sealed. Neighbors thought she was hiding valuables. In truth, she was hiding her children, the proof of her abomination. When Union troops arrived in March 1865, the main house had already burned. Whether by accident or Evelyn's design, no one ever learned. They found the underground rooms only because a soldier heard faint crying beneath the rubble. 19 children were pulled out alive. Evelyn Marston was not among them. Some said she fled toward Savannah. Others claimed she perished in the fire. No remains were ever identified. Captain Dorsey's report, filed under Unusual Occurrences, Burke County, described the children as malnourished but uninjured, speaking in unison of a mother who told them they were one flesh. They were taken to Augusta for medical care and later dispersed among orphanages. Most vanished into history. The ruins of Waverly Hall sank back into the woods. Locals avoided the place, saying the ground was cursed. In 1882, a farmer plowing nearby unearthed fragments of a ledger bound in cracked leather. The handwriting matched Evelyn's known letters. Among the last entries were these words: "The line is secure. My work is eternal. They are mine as I am theirs." To this day, the Marston family name appears nowhere in Burke County's official histories. The courthouse archives list no record of Waverly Hall. But if you travel the back roads southwest of Waynesboro, old residents will still point toward a stand of moss-draped oaks and say the land there hums at night like the sound of children singing underground. If this story disturbed you or made you wonder how many other secrets Georgia's soil still hides, take a moment to support the channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. Are you anywhere near Burke County? Does your town have legends like this buried beneath its fields? Because the truth is, some histories were never meant to stay buried.